Hello everybody, I'm Bitter, and I'm here to continue my review of the first season of Thomas and Friends. I will be reviewing 3 episodes today. Episode 18, Cole, 19, The Flying Kipper, and 20, Whistles and Sneezes. Let's get into it. Season 1, Episode 18, Cole. One morning, Henry was feeling very sorry for himself. Sometimes he could pull trains, but often he felt like he had no strength at all.
I suffer dreadfully, and no one cares. Rubbish, Henry. You don't work hard enough.
The Fat Controller spoke to him too, telling him that he's been very expensive, and new parts and paint haven't fixed his problems.
If we can't make you better, we must get another engine instead of you.
This made Henry and his crew very sad. Later, the Fat Controller was waiting when Henry came to the platform. Now without his hat and suit for the first time, he was going to ride in Henry's cab and see what was wrong for himself. Henry managed to start, but his fireman wasn't satisfied. He told the Fat Controller that Henry's a bad steamer, and no matter what he does to the fire, he can't make enough heat to keep steam up. He tried hard, but it was no good. Henry came to a stop at Edward's station, and ran off the train and into a siding, presumably through the station building with a bump like this. Edward took charge of the train, and the fireman and the Fat Controller spoke on the platform. The Fat Controller asked what the fireman thinks is wrong. "Excuse me, sir, but the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately, but today it's worse. The other engines can manage, they have big fireboxes. But Henry's is small, and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine."
It's expensive, said the Fat Controller, but Henry must have a fair chance. James shall go and fetch some.
When the Welsh coal came, Henry's crew were very excited, and ready to show what he could do. Henry's firemen put big lumps of coal along the walls of his firebox, and the smaller, more combustible bits in the middle, where the fire itself was burning. Henry was worried that he would ruin his fire, but as his fireman put it, "Wait and see, we'll have a roaring fire just when we want it." And the fireman was right. Henry was blowing off steam at the platform in no time. Sir Topham came to speak with him and asked how he was feeling. Henry answered with an enthusiastic, "I feel fine." The Fat Controller asked the driver if he had a good fire, and was very happy to hear, "Never better, sir, and plenty of steam."
No record breaking, don't push him too hard. Henry won't need pushing, sir. I'll have to hold him back.
And Henry left the station with a big smile on his face. He had never felt so well in his life. He wanted to go fast, but his driver just wouldn't let him. He was early to Thomas's station, and rushed off as soon as he could, too excited to take it slow, leaving Thomas, for possibly the first time, speechless. Review time. The music was good. 2 varieties of Henry's theme here. Sad and happy Henry. Henry's theme on its own is one of the best bits of music to come out of this show, in my opinion. And the fact that they adjust the theme to the tone of the episode is always going to be more impressive to me than having one sad theme that's applied to every character in all negative situations. The visuals are great as well. So many shots in the cab, and this is the first time we see the Fat Controller in anything but his suit. We get to look into Henry's firebox door. There's actual fire in there. The close-up model is being used very well here. Little technical bits are a very quick way to make me happy, of course. As for characters, we get to know Henry's crew just a bit. They both care for their engine, and the fireman really knows what he's talking about. When he told Sir Topham Hatt what would solve the problem, he was exactly right. We get a new dimension to the Fat Controller too. We already knew he was somewhat business-minded and that he cared for his engines, but in this episode, he rode in the cab himself to see what was up, and asked the crew what might make it better. He willingly took up higher costs just so Henry could lead a more normal life for a steam engine. His caring side is on full display here, even if it looked rough at first with the comment about replacement. It's a sweet story about someone getting a second chance and using it to its fullest extent. Gotta love the technical talk. 9 out of 10. One winter evening, Henry's driver is telling them that they'll be out early in the morning to take the Flying Kipper. He thinks if they pull it well, the Fat Controller will let him take the express. Henry loves the idea, and he could probably do it now that he has the Welsh coal. All kinds of ships use the harbor at the big station. There are all types of ships bringing all sorts of things in. There's a fish train going across the island that the railway men call the Flying Kipper. Henry was ready to go at 5 o'clock, and once it was time, Henry left. He pulled the train well, dragging the groaning trucks across the island. He left nothing but big clouds of smoke and steam across a winter landscape. He was going very fast, seemingly racing the sunrise. Eventually, a yellow signal appeared, but the next one was green, so off he went, back to speed. It was meant to be set to danger, though. Snow had forced it down. A goods train was waiting to let the kipper pass, and the crew were relaxing with the guard in his brake van, enjoying some cocoa. The kipper was due, though, so off the driver and fireman went. They got out just in time. No mention of the guard, though. Henry rammed the brake van hard, leaving it in pieces and coming off the rails himself. His crew had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry laid on his side next to the line in a daze. The Fat Controller came to see him, and Henry told him that the signal was down. The Fat Controller tells him it wasn't his fault. Ice and snow had caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crew, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different sort of engine and won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice? Henry said yes, but he was doubtful. Henry liked being at Crew, but he was very glad to come home. He looked so strong in his new shape that people along the line cheered for him as he passed. Schoolboys were often late because they'd stopped to see him run by, and he pulls the express so well that even Gordon is jealous. Review time. Music in this episode is the best that any episode in this season has. The song tells a story in a similar way to Thomas and the Trucks, but it builds tension better, in my opinion. The visuals again are at their very best. It's winter, and most of the episode takes place in the very early morning. The Knapford Harbor scene has an industrial atmosphere that the show will forever struggle to match, and the crash is displayed seriously. You could be forgiven for thinking Henry was done for at the end of that. He looks absolutely hopeless laying on his side in the snow off the rails. The sun rising as the story goes on is a very impressive thing when you consider how much work they had to do to reset the sky for filming. As for characters, having Henry rebuilt seems very in character for Sir Topham Hatt. A healthier Henry is a cheaper one to run, and a happier one. Henry suffers greatly here, and comes out on the other side a healthier and presumably happier engine, stronger and more confident. We don't see the results of this in this episode, but it is the catalyst for what could be huge growth for his character. We get a mention that Gordon is jealous of how well Henry pulls the express, and to be honest, he has good reason to be. Gordon's massively overqualified for this job, and Henry, as a Black 5, is cheaper to run. Not quite as fast, but pretty close. Also cheaper to maintain, better on the line. It checks out that Gordon would be jealous. He won't lose his job, of course, but I understand where he's coming from. I'm going to call this a 10 out of 10. I'd give it an 11 if I could. Season 1, Episode 20, Whistles and Sneezes. Henry was home and in his new shape. Gordon was jealous of Henry and was showing it by complaining. Henry whistles too much.
No respectable engine ever whistles loudly at stations. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it.
Poor Henry didn't feel happy anymore, but Percy told him he likes his whistling and that he's happy he's come home. Gordon rolls past, commenting, "Goodbye, Henry. We're glad to have you with us again, but remember what I said." Later, Henry stopped at Edward's station. Edward was complimenting Henry on his new look and happy whistle, when a strange sound could be heard in the distance. Gordon's whistle was stuck on, and he rushed through in a great hurry, pulling the express. Henry chuckled.
It isn't wrong, chuckled Henry, but we just don't do it.
Gordon continued on to the station, screeching terribly. When he got there, he was immediately sent away, and they fixed his whistle by hitting it with a hammer. That night, Gordon slunk into the sheds, glad to see it was empty. It wouldn't be that way for long, though.
It isn't wrong, murmured Henry to no one in particular, but we just don't do it.
But no one mentioned whistles. Next morning, Henry was enjoying himself, going on about how great he felt, and his coaches came along happily. He came to a bridge and whistled at some boys as he passed under. The boys threw stones at him and his coaches, breaking windows and scaring passengers. The passengers wanted to call the police, but Henry's driver had a better idea. The next day, Henry built up a lot of ash and was quite stuffed up. As he ran under the bridge, the boys were ready to throw their stones. Henry sneezed, throwing a big load of ash up the bridge and onto the boys. Henry felt quite happy with himself. Since he got home, he's put Gordon in his place and got back at some vandals who could have harmed people. Review time. The music is as good as usual. And the noise when Henry actually sneezes feels like a sneeze. The visuals are more impressive, though. The glass in the coaches are actually broken when the boys throw stones, and we get a moving face change, which is super cool. I don't know if we've got that before. A cool detail is seeing Gordon's whistle get knocked back into place. Not close to as impressive as the last episode, but much better than the first one, that's for sure. It feels like the show is finding its identity now. Gordon being jealous makes a lot of sense to me, seeing as this is the first time since he came to Sodor that there was a legitimate competitor for his work. And he isn't as mean as he used to be, but he's still a pain in the neck. Henry being a happier type of engine and teasing Gordon is a nice change. His new shape hasn't changed his personality greatly, but it's made him more confident, and rightly so. Clearly, he's got no problem getting revenge, but I feel like that sneeze was dangerous to those children. 7 out of 10, thanks to good music, cool visuals, and Henry being a more fleshed out character. It's not Flying Kipper level, and I nearly gave it an 8 out of 10. I could justify giving it an 8 out of 10 if I talked to myself a little more about it, but I'm gonna call it a 7 for now. It's not quite as good as Cole, but it's still enjoyable.
Nice.
That's all I've got for today. There'll be another video out in a week. It's gonna be 3 episodes again. That seems like a pretty good balance to me. Like, comment, subscribe, argue with me if you've got an argument. I'll see you in the next one.